I'm here with Eddy Harper-Mayhew, whose dad was quite a big noise in the early pioneering days of BBC Television's outside broadcasting, and they were based at the Palace of Arts in Wembley. Eddy, it's all about your dad, really, isn't it, this?
My dad's Harold Mayhew, better known as Grumps in the BBC, was superintendent of lighting outside broadcasts for most of the latter part of his professional life. He started his work career basically in the armed forces. First World War came about. He was about 14 or 15 and decided to enlist in the Navy. Lied about his age. The Navy wanted 16, he was 15. They discovered that and booted him out, and he finished up in the Merchant Navy, which did take people in at 15, and he started work on what were known then at the time as armed merchant cruisers or armed merchant fishing boats or something to that point. Basically a fishing boat with a gun on it. He at that stage began to learn something about radio telegraphy and finished the First World War with a working knowledge of how radio worked. That led him into working for a company called Marconi, who were very big in that world. He learnt more and more about it, became quite a leading light in the development of radio technology, and was posted to the Far East, to Hong Kong, where he became Marconi's Far Eastern representative. One of the contacts that he had out there that he worked for was Tony Sopwith, well known for the Sopwith Aircraft Company that produced aircraft during the First World War. Tony Sopwith had a large yacht and he wanted state-of-the-art technology in it, and my father was responsible for fitting that there.
Wow.
He spent probably quite a few years in the Far East. Unfortunately, he became suspected of having TB and was sent back to this country at the beginning of the 1930s. And when he came back to this country, he became interested in the way that radio was developing. He got involved in early developments for the BBC, and when the Second World War came about, he moved into radar and radar technology. Spent most of the Second World War developing radar, and when the Second World War finished, he thought, well, the next step up from radio is television. That's got to be worth a try. So he became interested in television, became one of the innovators of television, particularly television lighting. I think this photograph was taken in 1946, which is the year I was born, and it's a self-portrait that my dad took. I think it was probably taken at Rampisham, which was where he was based at the time. He'd always been an amateur photographer and became quite interested in how television lighting could produce better and more broadcastable photographs or pictures. So that's where he started in television. Got involved in Eurovision and the development of the links between Britain and other countries, far in advance of anything that happened in the 70s and 80s and 90s when we had the Eurovision Song Contest. This is 1950. Not many people had television sets at that time, but even so, people were thinking about the future. My father is the gentleman on the extreme right of the picture with a fag in his mouth, as usual for the time. And this is him with a group of people talking about the initial stages of setting up Eurovision.
Not many people had televisions in those days, did they? What was his job?
He was involved to begin with in outside broadcasts where all television programmes were live. There was no such thing as videotaping. So a television programme that was taken or that was broadcast from a farm or from a theatre or anything like that would become a subject of an outside broadcast, and live crews were sent out to do that. So each of the pictures was done live. He became the superintendent of outside broadcasting lighting. He was based at the Palace of Arts in Wembley, and went on to be responsible for many of the important outside broadcasts that the BBC was doing in the early and mid-50s. Probably the crowning point of his career at that time was the royal broadcasts from Sandringham that were done at Christmas, and 1957 was the very first of these broadcasts. The Queen had never been broadcast live before, and this was something of a revolutionary step. There had always been a broadcast on radio, but not on television. So December 1957, my father went up to Sandringham and lit the first of these broadcasts.
What sort of things could cause problems then with the lighting, Eddy?
Because television at the time was in black and white, it was quite important to choose the type of dress that the Queen would wear, because colour not coming through as colour would come through as different tones, and the wrong colours would probably produce the wrong tones in black and white. At this stage, most of the programmes were, which involved the Queen, were done from a distance.
Did that early camera equipment bring problems in those days?
Because at the time the Royal Broadcasts were done, cameras were very insensitive. Quite a heavy amount of lighting was required, and my father was always kidded about the amount of lighting that he used, that he never actually fried the Queen. And when he retired, there was a spoof card done showing a possible way in which the Queen was lit, and the saying was that it was quite surprising that she wasn't actually burnt out of existence by the power of the lighting that he used.
What a wonderful document to have, Eddie. Your dad was very good at his job and he was very well respected, but he did have a nickname, didn't he?
My father was often known as Grumps because he was very grumpy. On his door, instead of having a degree or anything like that after his name, he had the initials MOB, which stood for Miserable Old Bugger. He actually did receive a Christmas card from the Queen, which was addressed to Mr. Grumps. Unfortunately, my mother was responsible after his death for burning rather a large amount of the family history, and amongst those things that went on was the card that we received from the Queen. He was very, very well respected in the BBC. His skill in television lighting led him to lecture at the BBC's training school during his later years. And one of the famous people that he became responsible for getting involved in photography was Lord Snowdon. And Lord Snowdon frequently went out with my father on some of his outside broadcasts to learn about television lighting. Lord Snowdon, of course, became a very famous photographer in his own right. But I do like to think that some of his skills were actually learned from my father. Quite interestingly, the link with the royal family was continued because Lord Snowdon obviously became interested in the Queen's sister, Princess Margaret.
And later he went on to lecture at Wood Norton, the BBC's training centre in Evesham, didn't he?
While he was lecturing at the BBC training centre, he wrote a book on television lighting and the various techniques that should be used, and the book apparently has become a classic manual for the training of people who go into television. Very much has changed though since my father's day with digital photography and that kind of thing, but not that long ago, when my father's photographs of the Queen were shown on the Antiques Roadshow, one of the engineers that was involved in the televising of the Antiques Roadshow remembered that when he went to the BBC training centre, it was my father's book that he was given to teach him about television lighting, so the link is still there.
Now, your father was a very keen photographer, and although sadly not many of his photographs remain, there are just a few here, Eddie, which we'd like you to tell us about if you would.
This would have been Christmas 1957, the first royal broadcast live on Christmas Day from Sandringham. And obviously, whilst the scene was being set up and not an awful lot was going along, the two kids, Prince Charles and Princess Anne, were allowed to play around on the cameras. This is Princess Anne at one of the BBC cameras used in the broadcast. She's probably talking in the microphone to Prince Charles, and it's Prince Charles at the camera. He's probably this time talking to Princess Anne on the microphone, and she'd be listening to him in one of the other rooms or on the scanner. And wearing the typical clothes that a kid would have worn at that time. Nice socks, sensible shoes, nice long grey flannel trousers and a jumper. Prince Charles, Christmas 1957, is sitting at the desk that the first live broadcast was made. He's wearing headphones and probably pretending that he's the Queen. Little did he know that probably around about 70 odd years later he'd be the one making the broadcast. This is a posed shot of the Queen sitting at the desk from which he made the broadcast in order that my father could just check on the lighting. In the background you can see some really nice little family portraits of Prince Charles and Princess Anne. Again, 1957 Christmas live broadcast from Sandringham. This is Princess Anne sitting at the desk that the Queen used to make the broadcast from. Here we're a year on. This is the second live broadcast that the Queen made on Christmas Day. Again, it was live, so this is just before the actual broadcast was made. As I say, this is 1958. From my point of view, I think it's probably one of the nicest pictures I've seen of the Queen. It's very natural, nice pose, no forced grin or smile, rather lovely. A programme that was being made and done live in Paris as part of Eurovision, early days of Eurovision, was a play called La Parisienne, and the female lead in this was Brigitte Bardot. And here we have a photo of Brigitte Bardot. 1957, I think the photograph was taken. During the mid-50s, in a period of about a couple of years, we had two Russian politicians visit this country, Bulganin and Khrushchev, and also we had Harold Macmillan, and my father did the live broadcast for all of those politicians when they appeared on the news and various other programmes. And this is just a screenshot of Harold Macmillan and President Eisenhower of the United States on his visit to Britain. It would have been probably about 1956. This is a screenshot of President Eisenhower. My father took several screenshots just to check how the pictures that were being produced were coming across live on the television. It's rather blurred and grainy because at that time television was 405 lines, which didn't give particularly good definition. People now used to HD TV would be amazed at what we were having to watch in the 1950s.
Thank you, Eddie. It's been absolutely fascinating to get this insight, particularly how that historic broadcast of the Queen's speech was done way back in 1957. Well, thanks for joining us. I hope you'll join us for the next Personal Memories of the BBC here on Cornwall Stress Free Television.